because videos are big, right? So it's like you want to make sure. Like my wife, she records her. She's got all these videos on her phone, and every week it's like my phone is full. Like, well, Have you been recording the girls and videos? So anyway, probably edit that out. Um, all right, Sebastian. Am I pronouncing your name right? Because you're
Absolutely, Sebastian. Yeah,
okay. I didn't know
I'm
because
actually French, so it's
that's why I'm
Sebastien.
asking. Sebastien. That's
Sebastien.
okay. I don't know if you know this, but I'm fluent in French. We're not doing the podcast in French though,
No,
but
let's not do that.
not fluent enough to do it in French. I most not many people know I did French immersion growing up until
Okay.
I was 16, and I had 2 credits left to graduate high school with a French immersion diploma because you're from Canada, you're French Canadian, right? So
Yeah, French
you
Canadian.
know that they teach us you have better job opportunities if you speak French as
So not
well.
true. So not true.
And so just to show my parents they were wrong, I went to South America. And no, but that's another story, another journey. But so I was 2 credits short, and you know why I quit? Because I could read a book, like in high school you're reading novels and stuff, and then I'd read a chapter and just have no idea what I read. Like I could
Uh,
listen to the teachers, but anyway, so then I just never used French. I lived in Europe for a while, and then I primarily have been living in South America. And after learning Spanish, if I met someone who spoke French, I can't. I have to think about it. I have to concentrate, right? Like I can't just go with it. So
yeah.
anyway, it's I think you're the first French Canadian I've interviewed on this podcast over the years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a first. So what about you? So you grew up where?
I grew up in Montreal. I was born in 1974. Grew up in Montreal. We were pretty poor growing up, on welfare a lot. And my dad was,
Okay, I don't want to interrupt. I hate interrupting, but
no, go
look
ahead, buddy.
you look a lot younger than 48. That would make you, or
48. Yeah.
you're
48
very
years old.
youthful looking.
Thank
So
you.
anyway, I'm impressed.
I try real hard. I try real hard.
Okay,
It's
so
just,
okay, so
it's just an
yeah,
accident.
okay, so growing up in Montreal, right? So
Yeah, Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and grew up poor for the most part. And I discovered a love of, well, first of all, I became a Christian when I was about 9 years old. That's first most important thing in my life that you guys need to know, your audience needs to know. Um, so I became a Christian, but growing up in an unstable and broken household, my parents, get this, they divorced twice.
wow, this ain't
So they
but from
divorced,
each other.
yes, from each other. So
Okay,
they divorced. They remarried when I was about 9, 10 years old. And then when I was 14, they re-divorced.
and stayed divorced this time.
And they stayed, that was for good. But so I grew up very in an unstable household, to say the least. So there was the two divorces, but also when I was 14 years old, by the time I was 14, I had already moved 13 times. There was great instability, there was poverty, and the broken household aspect and welfare and all that stuff combined. It made for an idyllic childhood. Not so. the
Right.
point the point I'm making is I didn't come from a background that you would think, oh yeah, this guy's going to be an author someday, or he's um going to be doing ministry someday. I mean, I had, like, the ingredients were not really there for a favored lifestyle or anything like that. But the Lord is good. And pastor once told me when I was around 20 years old, he said, because I told him my life story, he said, it takes as much grace and power from God to keep a man from the world as it does to remove a man from the world. And
That's good.
that's my story. I mean, that's basically my story. From the
Very
age of nine
concise. Yeah.
on, from the age of 9 years old, he kept me from the world. He protected me. His grace accompanied me every day. And there were hurts, there were things to overcome for sure. I could go on and on about that, which that's not what I want to do. But the point I want to make is You can come from a really broken background and yourself be broken, and God can still make something out of you if you will yield to his spirit and his will in your life.
Story of my life, even up till now. So I told you offline that like I try not to bring up a lot of my story, my details and stuff, because it's like if repeat listeners will just get bored of hearing me tell a guest the same things all the time. But in this case, it's an exception because like not a lot of people know about whatever, like what life in Canada is like compared to the States or South America, or I lived in Holland for a little while. And so not a lot of people know details of like what say our upbringing in the 90s, or maybe you more in like the late 80s or so. I mean, we're a big enough age gap that like we would have had some different experiences in that time in Canada. But you're making me remember now. Like I've never been to Montreal. I've been to just Hull, Quebec, and I've never been west in Canada. I've traveled more outside of Canada than inside it. I've been I've been all over the eastern seaboard of America, and then some places in Europe and stuff. So now you're getting my juices flowing about this kind of stuff. So how did you come to know the Lord in like you said you were 9 when you gave your life to him? But
Yeah,
like what was your Christian experience anyway growing up in I don't know, your era and your part of the country,
yeah,
culture rather.
it was a very muddled background. Mostly my upbringing was mostly Catholic. But then my dad was a denomination hopper, and he didn't like Catholics. He didn't like Catholicism. So we went like when I was 6 years old, we went the Jehovah's Witnesses. Then later it was the Baptists. And of course, there was still Catholicism muddled in there. Um, but when we went to the Baptist church, that's when my dad had remarried my mom, and he was trying to bring stability to the household, religion wise. So we went there every Sunday. Me, my mom, and my dad. My sister stayed home for some reason. They judged it at 14 she could make her own decisions. But that didn't fare too well. But the point is, I was there, I was present, and I was a little bit antisocial, kind of shy because I was bullied in school. I didn't like to spend much time with other children that much. So when it was time, in a Baptist service or an evangelical service, they call the children up to go to Sunday school at some point in the service right before the sermon, right? So when it was time for that, I had never wanted to go, never. But God is clever. I mean, like God can outwit us at every bend, right? So that didn't stop him. So the preacher preached the message, and at the end of the message, sure enough, this is a Baptist church, he gave the invitation to accept Jesus. And on that particular Sunday, I was touched. I felt pulled, and I just got out of my seat. I passed my dad and mom, got out of my seat, went straight up at the front, and the pastor looked at me, says, "Do you understand what you're doing right now? Do you understand what I talked about today?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." And I didn't really, because at 9 years old, there's only certain things. What I understood, that Jesus loved me, and he wanted to save me, and that I needed saving because my life, even though I was just 9, there was so much instability in it. So I gave my life to Christ right then and there, and he never let me go after since that day.
Right. That's cool.
That's how I came to Christ.
I didn't give my life to Jesus for real until like 15, but I thought I did when I was like 7 or 8 or something. And like I had people in my neighborhood doing daily vacation. No, not. They did this like
Yeah,
Bible.
Vacation Bible School.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And they do that in the summer. But I'm now thinking, no, 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 that's not what I mean. It was like in the wintertime, my babysitter was a believer, and a friend I made, his mom, and then this other lady, the three of them were doing some kind of like thing in my babysitter's house every Tuesday or something for a while. And it was like that, like a Bible program or something. And one day I'm walking home from school and I'm like, Jesus, I want to give my life to you, or some kind of thing like that. And I told them, so they made me fill out a card and gave me this thing to celebrate and whatever. But I didn't know what I was doing until like I was like 15 or whatever. But I always wondered if like maybe there was like some kind of seed planted in me at that young age because of how hard it was to like enjoy sin or whatever. Yeah, my friends going off and getting, into drugs and whatever, and how like I just didn't like want to. I didn't want to follow Jesus, but like, the world doesn't look enjoyable either. It's just like, and then it wasn't until I was like uh 15, and as I'm listening to you, it's reminding me of like my own experience where I knew the gospel. I knew, Jesus died for your sins and stuff, but like it didn't really dawn on me until like I was 15. Like, why does that matter? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
if he died for my sins and that's what it takes, and I'm gonna not go to hell or something, then yeah, of course, great. I'm glad he did that, or whatever. But like, there was this moment where I'm in the 10th grade and I'm sitting in one of the front pews at church, and there was no Sunday school, or we didn't have a youth pastor, or I don't know what, but I was listening to the message, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Not Jesus died for me on the cross. Jesus died for me,
Oh my
like on the
goodness.
cross. Like there was just something that's like years of hearing the gospel message, but it was this moment where I'm like, oh my goodness, like, and
Yeah.
then something like overwhelms, and so sometime in the months to come, like I really made a commitment myself, right? But I was around the gospel message, and I could quote John 3:16 and these verses and stuff to you, but like it didn't matter. It didn't penetrate my own heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But there's levels of awareness. I mean, obviously, when you accept Christ at 9 years old, there's a lot of stuff you don't understand. And so as you grow, I mean, we didn't even go to church that regularly. I mean, when they divorced the second time, it was over even before that. So at the age of 14, I didn't have a local church. I just went back to a local church when I hit 21 on my own. So there's levels of awareness as you're growing that I still have them. I'm 48 years old and I've been saved for a long time, and there's still new levels of awareness of the amplitude of that relationship. And there's
I
going to be
get you.
some until I die.
Right. Like my daughter is 8, my oldest. How old are your kids?
Jason is 13. He's our oldest. And then I have two daughters. Marissa is 10 and Katie is 7.
Right. So like my oldest 8, 5, and then 2, and my wife took the 2-year-old, right? And then the hard stop I have on this call is to go get the other two from school. They have exams this week. So their school is done early and I go get them and whatever. But my 8-year-old is, always wants to pray, or if there's a problem, it's like, well, let's pray. And we had baptisms in our fellowship, months ago, and she told my mom that she wants to get baptized. And we're like, okay, well, let's explore this further. You know what I mean? To see if she has an idea of, like, has she made some kind of commitment in her heart? Like, you know, could we get her to realize or tell us, like, she has or she wants to make this commitment to Jesus? Because I remember what it was like for me at that age, but I still, if she wants to pray, we let her, like, I bet there's something to that childlike faith. And
Absolutely.
you and I are talking on a Thursday. Well, this Saturday I talked to a woman who, and this can, we can come back around to this point I'm bringing up. There's a woman who read one of my books on healing, and she's in France. Another French speaker that I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do this call in French. But anyway, fluent in English. And she'd reached out to me wanting to know if I pray for people over the internet for, she explained what she wanted. And so I bring my daughter in. I was like, "Do you want to pray for, Miss Alice?" And she's like, "Okay." And she just believes, no problem. You know, my sister, or sorry, my wife's sister was here a few weeks ago for my wife's birthday, and she came in with a crutch, and she's got something wrong, for months. And before they left, my wife was like, "Can you pray for Gloria?" I was like, "Okay, Jamina, the 8-year-old, do you want to be involved in this? Do you want to, And so I let her, touch her aunt, her tia Gloria, and I'm like, I don't know if my daughter is saved yet or has made a commitment, but it's like, um, we include her in stuff like that for now as part of the process. You know what I mean? Like the Lord's kindness leads to repentance. You know, I'm big into that now. And anyway, I don't know where you are on things like hell or universalism and things, and humor me if it's the opposite. But like I said, I don't mind having a
I'm still
conversation.
learning, to be
You
honest.
know,
I mean, I
like I don't, I've not become a universalist myself, but I'm like, when I was 20, I would have been like hardcore, make the sinner know they are a sinner and make them cry and know that they need the savior. And like I was a lot more like that, right? I'm
Yeah, me
probably
too. And it's funny how with age, we there's more gray zones. When we're young Christians, it's black and white, real black and white. Then you grow in your experience and your walk with God and knowing people's plights and all kinds of stuff. And wow, there's a lot of gray zones that we don't have answers for, you know. And that's my situation that I and there's like the older I get, the more gray zones I find, the more
yeah.
questions I have.
The older we get, the less we know. Kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
right. Okay, neat. So yeah, there's so much more we could be kind of comparing about our growing up and stuff. But I'm just curious because I've never been, like I said, I've never been to Montreal. I've never spent significant time in Quebec. But I remember my all my high school teachers were my French teachers anyway were always Quebecois
Okay.
and crazy. And are all the teachers in Quebec crazy like they are in Ontario? I'm
Well,
half kidding.
I
I'm half
wouldn't
kidding, but
I wouldn't talk about necessarily the teachers, but I can give you a maybe the gist of how the population kind of thinks. Um, Quebec is a particular place when it comes to evangelism or anything else because of its very particular cultural background, which was very Catholic prior to the 60s. And when the 60s hits, then there was, peace and love and all that. For Quebec, for the province of Quebec, they called it La Révolution Tranquille, which is the quiet revolution. In other words, the mindsets of people started really shifting and they started throwing religion out in droves. They came out of it in droves, they threw it out, and they threw the baby out with the bathwater. So anything religious or reminiscent of Catholicism, they have a knee-jerk reaction against it and reject it, and they fell gradually with the decades, they fell into a very new agey default mindset. So if you talk to a typical Quebecer, it's the universe, it's life, it's law of attraction, it's, I mean, so on and so forth. It's like their default religion. And you're like, where did you get that? Did you read books about that? No. So they just like, it's just they develop that mindset and it's very very common and the percentage of evangelicals in the province of Quebec as opposed to the rest of Canada. I don't know the rest of Canada, but I know the rest of Canada is higher. The percentage of people who have Protestant or evangelical background in Quebec, it's less than 2%. So when you're an
that's what I
evangelical
wanted
in
to tap
Quebec,
into. Yeah.
when
Sorry.
yeah, when you're an evangelical in Quebec, yeah, like you're going against the grain, huge, like big time, and you're looked upon like an extraterrestrial. They're like, who is this kook? Because see, the rest of Canada, chances are they have an aunt, grandmother, someone who's an evangelical or Protestant, and they kind of know about it. They're familiar with it. In
Right.
Quebec, they're like, what the heck are you talking about, dude?
Right.
Like it's that bad. So it's a very particular place to talk about Jesus, to talk about the gospel, to talk about the Bible. If you talk about the Bible, they always have a knee-jerk reaction response. It was
Right.
written by man, it's full of errors, blah blah blah. Did you ever
Well,
read it? No.
well,
Okay.
if you,
So you
I
have an
want to,
informed opinion, but you never read
I
it.
wrote down like four things, little notes to come back to on
Yeah.
that you're provoking me to think about. But I remember this one teacher I had in so this was 1997, and that's where I heard this statistic that like the percentage of couples that were like not married but like live together, or kids that their parents aren't married or whatever. Like I forget what the statistic was that she said, but that how Quebec was the highest
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that. And this is the 90s, right? So I don't
yeah.
know. I'm
And
not up to
highest suicide rate in Canada as well,
right.
ironically.
Right.
Yeah.
And then once I started getting, more like so 97 is whenever I got saved and I'm attuned and paying attention to things differently around me and in life and in the world and whatever. And I heard somewhere in the 90s that like I might just be saying the same thing as you already said, but worded differently. But that like Quebec is one of the most secular
Yeah. Very.
places in the world, right?
Yes.
Like it's a province in a country, but because it's this own distinct culture, language. I wrote down my notes in 1995. You know what I'm referring to when I say that. That like
Absolutely.
this is a part of our country that tried to or has wanted to separate and become its own country for part of that's our history is Quebec. Like when I tell people no, we don't have I have a lot of American friends that are there's Republican, Democrat, there's left and right, and in Canada there's left and right, but it's like fractured into these different groups, and that there's a party whose whole
We
existence
don't
is to
have much
separate.
right anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, but you get what I'm saying, right? There's more than two parties, but they still fall into the left and right, and there's a party whose whole existence is to like separate from the country. Like
Yeah.
you talk to an American or some Europeans, and you explain that to them. It's just hilarious that
Yeah, it
like
is, because why would they allow that, right? I mean,
it's
why
like
would a party be allowed that?
it's like imagine in I don't know the U.S. Senate or something for those listening that this would be make more sense. You had like Texas,
Yeah.
who they have like just there's Republican and Democrat and then like Party of Texas or something
There's the
in
Texan
your
party.
elections. Yeah, and
Yeah.
their whole thing is to have enough momentum to actually become their own country, but instead you also have the other provinces to the east of Quebec that would basically have to like secede as well or join America or I don't know what like I've heard stories and ideas but anyways this hilarious stuff. I've never kind of had people on the podcast to discuss, but anyway I said
Yeah.
1995, right? That was my the first month or two of my high school experience. I know people who went by bus to Quebec. I can't remember the cities or the places, but for protests when there was that referendum vote, there was people voting on, and you've lived through two of them, right? Because then the first one was in
Yeah, I was 6
80.
years old in the first
Yeah,
one, so I didn't have.
so I
I
didn't
just
fully
remember the
know.
flag saying yes and
Yep.
no, and I didn't like understand what yes and no meant, and
Yeah,
yes
but
and
so
no.
you would have been like an adult when the one in
Yeah,
95, and
and I
I was
voted.
kind of
I don't even remember what I voted. I was influenced by my dad. I don't even know if I voted yes. I don't think I voted yes because I didn't see the point. I like the Canada.
right,
I like the Rockies. I mean, there's stuff I like about Canada for sure.
right.
So I don't think I would have voted separation at all. But I don't remember. I don't recall. I just recall
I
um,
was 14.
the aftermath of the whole thing.
Right, right. There's some people who were upset, and so for listeners, some more cultural kind of trivia. Like I'm fluent in Spanish, but before I lived in Pensacola and then Charlotte, North Carolina. And I remember if you use an ATM, there's going to be Spanish and English. But you don't go to the supermarket and you pick up a box of cereal. There's not a Spanish side and an English side like in Canada, there's French and English, everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you're having a box of cereal and one side is in French and the other side is in English. Like that stuff blows people's mind when I tell them about it. But I'm like, oh, it's not like that in other countries with multiple languages, you know, like we have language police. I don't know what that's like from your side, growing up in
Well, now I'm in PEI, so obviously I don't fall into under that type of jurisdiction anymore. But I know it's gotten worse since I left.
really.
I left Quebec uh, about 10 years ago, uh, back in 2012. And one of the reasons we did leave, one of the main reasons was the fact that it was too pagan for our taste. We would just we didn't want to raise children. Like, we were from the great region of Montreal. That's where we lived. And if you go in rural areas, it's not as bad. But when you're in big city areas, it was extremely liberal, like to a
Hmm.
point where it disgusted us.
Right.
Right. And we didn't want to raise children in that environment. And we thought, let's go to English Canada. I mean, I worked at Canada Post at the time. I was working for the post office. And when you work for this big government company, you can ask for a transfer pretty much anywhere in Canada. And if your seniority permits, you will get it. And we did. So we moved to Prince Edward Island to have a little bit more of a grounded, I would say, surroundings for our children. But even here, I mean, it's pretty pervasive, the how it infiltrates the minds of people through media, uh, the
Right.
thinking, the mindset, and all that. Yeah. So
Well,
it didn't take
even for
long.
the listeners' benefit, I remember I think like 100 Huntley Street is still on, and I grew up in Peterborough, Ontario, family mostly from Brantford, Ontario, and so like every few weeks or something visiting, we drive through like Toronto and Burlington, and on the side of the road there's that the 401, the highway. You basically drive. I would drive by it all the time growing up. Their headquarters, their studio or whatever, because it's facing the highway and stuff. And if you don't even have to have cable, but if you had this one, depending on how far away you lived from Toronto, there's the global TV, based out of Toronto,
Station.
or the one we have is from Toronto, and so it would just 100 Huntley Street would be on, like, and so I'm mostly in this Christian kind of bubble, going to church and then eventually youth group before I got saved, and you didn't have to have TV, cable, but you could turn on the TV and it'll be global, right? Like if your TV attunes to whatever the signal, the channel that's on, and so in the mornings or something, weekday mornings, that's on. And so one day when I'm turning on the TV or that channel's on, the main host was saying something about how only 12% of Canada is Christian or something, and I forget whatever else the context was that he was talking about. But I remember thinking to myself, really? Like I was enough of a bubble that like I didn't realize this. I'm around the gospel and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, okay. And then it started to kind of open this, thing in me. Like, now I get why a lot of my friends at school don't know or care about this stuff. And so anyway, I'm saying that to say I was blown away when I went to Bible school, that like in Pensacola anyway, very Bible Belt area of the country, there's like Christian radio stations. Like there wasn't any of that in my area of Peterborough. Like it's not a densely populated city like if you went to Toronto or something. And then once I had moved away from home and was coming back and stuff, there's like a Christian radio station that's kind of rebroadcast from somewhere else into Peterborough. And but like to go to be turning the radio, and there's like not even just Christian radio stations but like worship radio stations, and getting a taste for how much more Christian the culture is in places like the southern part of the United States. And so it's like I came to appreciate that kind of stuff an awful lot. Um,
Yeah.
and some people don't know just how easy the gospel is as far as their culture goes. Like it's just such a married part of their culture, and how Canadians can look south and scratch our head at like I'm not going in this direction too much, but the politics being married with so like the evangelical right and stuff like that. Like it's not like that for us, like in
No,
Canada at all.
not at all. Like, not at all. And it's easy also, like you mentioned, if you're growing up in Canada and you are, at the youth group and at church on Wednesday night and at church on Sunday morning and at church on Sunday night, and you're always running with the same crowd, to think that this is the norm. Because I've met people, I was in church with such people. When they went out to evangelize, it seemed like they didn't know who they were evangelizing, what their backgrounds or beliefs were. They just approached it so much from well, the Bible says this. Well, yeah, they didn't even care about the Bible. You're getting ahead of yourself, dude. Like, do you understand? Like, so they were really preaching from a, this is how we were taught with, I don't know, explosion evangelism or whatever program people follow. Go through those motions and you will have given them the gospel message. But for a lot of people out there, it's lost on them. And that's what, just, can I talk about a book I wrote? Is that okay? That was, yeah, that's why I wrote, I Did It All For You. It's written in the person, but when my wife and I discussed this book, all books begin with an idea, right? That was the idea. We met with so many people throughout the years, the decades, and so many people have an angle on who Jesus was, what the Bible is it trustworthy, what they believe, are they new agey, are they scientific, are they this, are they that? Everybody has a different angle or a place or filter from which they look at Jesus Christ, at the Bible, and at truth ultimately. And I was like, you know what? What if we were to write a gospel tract? It was supposed to be a tract. It became a book from the perspective of, it's Jesus talking to the person. So it's written in the first person. Jesus is speaking directly to the unsaved person. And he addresses, it became a book because I had, throughout, as I was writing, I realized I have to address pretty much the spectrum of what's out there. New age, addiction, politics, scientism. I call it scientism when people put all their faith in science. Whatever background people have, they always have an excuse or a defense against the gospel. I don't believe this because that. So I was like, what if we could write a book that it's Jesus talking and he debunks every single one of these beliefs one at a time, path, but he does so in love, and he does so with, hey, I know where you're coming from. I understand why you're thinking like this. Let me guide you into a different view, a different understanding of who I am, what I came to do. And so the book was born. Like I said, it was supposed to be a tract. That went out the window after 2 hours of writing. I realized I was already at 10 pages. Like, this is not going to be a tract, Liz. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, it's going to be a book. She says, oh, no, not another book. Because when I write a book, I become so invested and tunnel visioned that I'm I don't know. It's a deformation, a professional deformation. I
I
mean,
get
it's
it.
just,
I have the
you,
same problem where my wife had to tell me 2 or 3 years ago, we had this
yeah,
kind of, we came to a head where, okay, Steve, you need to have like a timer, or you need to have something where
yeah,
you
exactly.
pull away from the laptop, because when you get writing or you're working
Yeah.
on someone's book and you're on your computer, hours can go by and you
Oh,
just you get up to
and
go
you're,
pee or make a coffee and that's it. I was like,
yeah,
okay.
sometimes I don't even get up to go pee and my eyes are yellow. But the point is, like, you're just sitting at your laptop and you're in the zone, and the Holy Spirit is just pouring it in, pouring it in. It was just like that book was. I still reread it. Sometimes we all do that. I think, as authors, their books are little babies, right? And I keep copies in my home, of course, of the books I wrote, and sometimes you peruse through the book and you're kind of amazed. I mean, I don't know if you're like that, but sometimes I'm amazed. Like, I didn't really write this. Like, that was Holy Ghost.
Yep.
That was really
Dude,
me, because
have
this
you
the
have you
power.
done audiobooks yet?
I looked into it, and to be
Okay.
honest, my wife was pushing me for it. She's like, "You need to do
Well,
audiobooks. You need to do audiobooks. Everybody's doing
all
audiobooks."
right. Well,
I'm like,
hold
"Yeah,
that
I know
thought.
I need to do
Yeah.
audiobooks, but the only problem is
Well,
I
the reason
suck
I
at
ask,
technical stuff."
sure, but the reason I ask is because I've had that each of my books when I go back and I'm narrating them, and in the case of a few of them, it's a few years later. Um, the tongues one, I did it a lot more immediately after it was published. But when I'm doing the audiobook and I'm saying it out loud and I'm looking at my screen and recording it, I'm getting hit with stuff going, wait, that was, I put that there before? Like that was there?
Yeah,
That, like there's these Holy Ghost moments. I'm like, that was not me. That's too brilliant.
there you go.
And there was this moment in you might like this from what I'm hearing you say so far. In my tongues book, there's this, culmination I'm building towards in the final section. Like my book is about lies people believe about speaking in tongues, just focusing on the objections. But when I get to this part where I included stuff I wanted in the book, in case I never put it into another book. I'm reading it going, oh my goodness, it ties together, and I didn't realize that, and I'm the one who wrote it. Like I,
Yeah,
oh my
exactly.
goodness, Sorry, I'm saying
Yeah,
that to
that's the
say,
scribe. I call that the scribe
yeah,
anointing. I mean, it's a term there in the industry. There's Christian writers, but there's Christian writers who have a scribe anointing, and the scribe anointing really works in conjunction with the Holy Spirit, just working it through you in such a way that there's supernatural action going in the writing. And that I think that that book is probably, I Did It All For You is probably the most anointed book I wrote, uh, because I really like the prayer I had, because I was anguished when I was going to write that book. I was like, Liz, do you realize I'm going to pretend I'm Jesus? She's like, you're not going to pretend you're Jesus. You're going to ask Jesus to write through you. And because Liz, I often bounce stuff off of my wife. She's my closest confidant. She's my encourager. She's such a wonderful person in my life. I always bounce stuff off her because she's has a strong entrepreneurial spirit. She's very smart. She gets stuff very instinctively. So when we discussed that book and we were going to write that book, that was my greatest fear. It was like, how? What if I misrepresent the Lord? What if I mess this up? She's like, you're not, because you're going to pray this book in so much. You're going to pray about it so much every time you write. You're going to bathe it in prayer. And my biggest prayer for the book was always, Lord, make me not misrepresent you. Make me speak your words the way you would have said them. Because obviously it's not the God. I wasn't just copy pasting the Gospel of Mark or Gospel of Matthew. There's 120 scriptural references that are all that are found throughout the book. They're as footnotes, right? So whenever there's something that Jesus says that is taken from the gospel, that there's footnotes at the end that people can refer to and go check it out in the Bible for themselves and say, okay, yeah, Jesus really did say that. But it's phrased like it's really flows, because Jesus is talking to this particular person at a particular juncture in their life, and it has to be universal. So he has to be talking to the drug addict as well as the CEO, as well as the single mother, as well as the teenager who's, so it has to be universal. And the person has to feel like, although it covers all the spectrum of human experience, the person has to feel like he's talking to me. This is me. And that was the toughest challenge. But, God's been so good. And it's been just such an amazing experience for me, because I don't consider I believe I do have a prophetic anointing when it comes to writing. But until the time I wrote that book, I didn't think that I could be a prophetic writer in that sense. And God showed me otherwise. So that book's very, very special for me.
now was that the first book you wrote, or
No, that's
okay,
not the first. That was the sixth. It was
okay?
the
So I'm
sixth,
curious. I'm curious
seventh.
because it made sense to jump to that book. So let's back up. I'm curious how you got into writing. I ask
Oh
every
man,
time I have a guest on this, it's usually a book they've written, or they have written books, and I always love finding out about someone's writing journey.
I love talking about my writing journey. So we're going something that I love talking about,
Oh,
because
I wrote a note down and I forgot to even bring it up when we were going there. But we were talking about our teachers, and we're talking about and I made jokes about like having crazy French teachers. And so well I was in the eighth grade, and I'll just try to take 30 seconds to tell this. I'll be quick, and then whatever, if it interests
yeah,
you, elaborate. But I want to give time to you're the guest. And her name was Priya Harding, and I I'll never forget. She was teaching us about like how in French and in Spanish you aren't scared, right? But you have fear. So like tengo
yes.
miedo in Spanish, or j'ai peur in French. And so I'll never forget this. She had a chair, and she said like, this chair is my fear. I have it, and now I don't. And she threw the chair,
Oh yeah.
and everyone remembers her as the teacher who threw that chair. And it was like, it's not like she put anyone's safety in danger or anything like that. It was just a brilliant analogy we
It's
all remembered and never forget,
yeah,
for helping us
I love it.
learn. So you know how in French, like some verbs, like we have avoir and être,
Avoir et
like
être.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're pronouncing it correctly. Anyway, that's how bad my French is. But like anyway, like I said, I could read a book and not know what I'm reading. Well, like you have things in French and you have things in Spanish, as opposed to like in English, you are, or
Mm,
or I don't want to get into talking about woke and Latinx, Latin X, when it's like you talk to an actual Spanish speaking person and they'll laugh because in French and in Spanish things are binary, like the language is binary. Like you something there's a le table or la table, like it's one of them. There's words are a feminine or a feminine or a masculine pronoun
masculine
and
or
stuff.
feminine.
So it's
Yeah.
like anyway, a lot of English speaking people don't get that, and if they don't know French or Spanish or other languages that have within those languages, that's the way it works. It's not an oppression or someone being oppressed or something if you don't do what they do in English with the language. Anyway, so Priya Harding, back to my point. um I we had her for 8th grade English, and my other friends had her in homeroom, and I forget what it was, where she would encourage me in my writing. So like whatever the homework was, I always handed in too much, or like I would always go over what the requirement was and whatever. So she would, um, but she was, I don't know. I think I saw her at a Loblaws once when I was last in Canada, and I wanted to go up there and say, "Hey, I've written books. Do you remember me?" Or something. I don't know what I would have said if I approached her, if she would have remembered me or whatever, right? Like I could have sworn it was her, just grayer hair, but same spitting image of how I remember her in the '90s. And anyway, I'm saying that to say, um, this teacher, even though she wasn't, she would make fun of the gospel or like whatever, the origin, creation, Genesis story and stuff like that. Like I remember things, but anyway, when I started the 9th grade, I wrote some kind of like short story or some kind of fake biography or I don't know what, kind of like envisioning what I wanted to do with my life. But as a 14-year-old, I veered off course, didn't whatever. But I remember she read it for me, and I didn't want my friends to know. Like I didn't want my friends to know that like I'm going back to like a teacher I had last year that we all thought was nuts. And I'm like, but like I remember appreciating that she was fanning into flame that I had this gift and this desire for writing.
Mm,
Anyway, um, so I just wanted to make sure to record that, put that out there into the ether.
absolutely.
I know I just asked you a question and then stopped you and talked,
No, it's okay. I,
but
I know where we're going,
yeah, your
and
writing
it
journey.
makes, you know what's, I think that's great because I think this is going to add value to the audience because this, I'm going to piggyback on that because I have now an anecdote of my own concerning a high school teacher. I was in 12th grade, and our high school teacher was, I kid you not, he looked like Rasputin. Do you know what Rasputin? The long beard, the creepy look. He wore cowboy boots, and he was a very intimidating guy. And he said right from the get go, first class, first course, he says, "I tell you in advance, you guys are going to do 5 oral presentations during this school year." Right then and there, I wanted to die because I was a very shy guy, very not self-assured, the complete opposite of that. Awkward, at that awkward age, I was bullied. I mean, there was a combination of things there that I was like, oh no, oh no, where's the exit? Where do I get out? And one of these orals really didn't go well. I was so anxious about it that I almost fainted in front of the class. I became white like a ghost. My mouth became pasty. I couldn't talk. I passed. Thank goodness. I had a passing grade, but just pretty much just passing grade. And everybody was worried about me. They all thought I was going to fall. And after that, I had a fever. It was so bad. I did 102-degree fever Fahrenheit, and I had to go home sick. That's how bad it went. Now, years later, picture this. I'm like 22 years old. I'm in my local Baptist church, and I'm involved in the youth group. I'm considered an up and coming um, minister, and I had already preached a couple times to 300 people in my church. I'm at a restaurant ordering pizza, and who do I see sitting there? That teacher who was training us to speak in public. So I'm like, I'm going to go talk. He needs to know this. It's going to be a great anecdote for his class this afternoon. So it's lunchtime. He's having lunch. I go straight to him. I say, hey, Mr. Demers, do you remember me? He looks at me. He looks at me and says, I think I do. He says, weren't you that kid who almost fainted? I says, yes, I was. And check this out. Just last week, I preached a sermon to 300 people. His eyes bugged out of his head. He's like, you're kidding. I said, no, I am not. I wanted to tell you that to this day, I still use some principles that you taught us on how to write a solid text, because he didn't want any going in front and just parading, kind of off the cuff kind of thing. He said, first you write a solid text. I'm going to grade you on your text. And then you go in front and you read that text to the best of your ability by looking at the crowd. So that's the way he taught us. So I'm like, I still use to this day the principles you taught us then. I write a solid text, well researched, and then I go in front and I deliver my sermon. And he's like, you want to hear something funny? I said, go ahead. The method I taught you guys that I still teach today is the method that was taught at Montreal's Great Seminary. Montreal's Great Seminary is where they formed priests back then. They probably do still today. I was like, you're kidding. He says, no. I said, well, you're going to have something to tell your students this afternoon. He said, you know what? Thanks for coming over. This really made my day. It made my day too, to share this with them, because I was like, these guys, these teachers, they invest themselves in their students, right? Even if they're weird and they look like Rasputin, that doesn't mean that their heart is not in the right place. And that guy sure had a heart in the right place. He wanted to teach us the proper way to do an oral presentation. But all this to say that it's good to honor your teachers by going back to them sometimes a year or two later, sometimes 5 years later, 10 years later, and say, hey, you know what? You had an impact.
I did that recently too. Sometime in the last year, I saw Mr. Bryan, Curtis Bryan, and I saw somebody, I don't know, somebody I went to high school with. I saw them say or do something on Facebook, and like you see the comments or likes or whatever. Then I went and I messaged him, and whenever he accepted my request, I I did the very thing I blast marketers and stuff for doing, where like the instant they accept your friend request, you get this pitch from them. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't pitch him anything, but I wrote like this paragraph, like I've written books and all that kind of stuff, and I live in Peru right now and whatever. I have no idea what he would. If you're a betting person and you like look at your students and like who's gonna do this or that, like I would not be the person you think would write a book. I don't think. I had him 3 times in high school. I had 10th grade English, and that was the semester when I gave my life to Jesus. So it's like the beginning of the semester. I was not a believer, and I remember ending the semester that way. Uh, I'm not going to go down this rabbit trail, but he taught us to debate, and we had this debate thing we had to do that year. And I remember I was doing abortion, like if it's a sin or not or something, I forget what. And my partner, who was debating for it, his dad was a Presbyterian minister, and until then, I had thought he was a believer too. Like, well, if your dad's a priest or something, then you are probably a Christian. It's like I entered this world now, like, oh, just because doesn't anyway. And I remember being shocked at how he mopped the floor with me
Oh,
debating that topic. Like
really?
I felt no, but I felt like um as it anyway, I don't want to go too far down that road, but I remember feeling like, but this is the truth. This is right. But like I clearly sucked at making my case. You know what I mean? And so that planted this seed in me about like needing to know how to defend things. And I might not, as I'm an adult now, but like eventually I learned, well, I might not convince like other people of what I think is right, but like there was something that happened to me that day where I'm like, I just, if there was a who won and who lost the debate, it was like I lost, and and that was him. And then the 12th graders, or was it both my last years of high school, I had a history class with him and then a writing class, and that was the game changer. The writer's craft, it was called. And he approached me, he warned me before starting it because I'd failed the history the semester before because I was just lazy and was just, get my 5.0 and go, just show up, get 50%, graduate and whatever, right? Like, um, but the writing class was like, this is, stuff is stewing in me and I'm enjoying this. And he brought in a technical writer about like, learning how to people hire her to uh, test their product, and then she writes the instruction manual. And so she has us hold up a shoe and say, tell me how to tie this shoe, like tell me what this is and how to use it and what it's for and whatever. And you can't use words like shoelace, tongue, and all the terms like we just know what they are. Like, and it was a hard exercise, but it made me mindful of being descriptive and making sure the reader understands what I'm talking about.
I love
And
this.
so I have all these little things from, like, this guy Curtis Bryan, Mr. Bryan, like the little tidbits, and he would get on his desk and jump around and silly things like that. And anyway, maybe I'll tag him or something whenever this post we publish this. But same here. So like Priya Harding, Curtis Bryan, these people in high school are a huge contribution to like
Yeah.
my writing style and thought process and things like you're talking about this teacher telling you where he had gotten what he's teaching you as far as writing and delivering sermons
Yeah.
goes. And
And if you would have asked them to bet, to say, hey, who's going to become a public speaker in your group, when I was in high school, he never would have said, that guy right there who almost fainted, he's going to become a public speaker. So that's the beauty of life, and that's the beauty of sanctification as well, how the Lord can take us from something that we thought we'd be a failure at for the rest of our lives and completely spin it around and make something beautiful out of it. They say that your greatest misery will be your greatest ministry. Well, that for me, that was my greatest misery growing up. Even when I began preaching, I remember feeling great anguish. And see, today, when I teach people about public speaking, I tell them it's very simple. If you're nervous, you're making it about you. It's as simple as that. So you check your heart, check your mind. If you're nervous, and it's okay to be nervous. There's nothing wrong about being nervous. I mean, I was a little bit nervous before I went on your podcast today.
same here all the time.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's a good, like Sylvester Stallone would say in Robbie, like it's Frankie fear, like there's fire inside you. If you let it go out, it's gonna devour you. But if you contain it, it's gonna give you that heat and that power. That's what you need to advance. Anyway, sorry about that.
No, you had this is mostly going to be like people are only going to hear it. They're not going to see the face you made when you were doing that too. That
Okay, good. Because I'm making a sunny face with a crooked mouth and everything. Anyway, so all this to say, it's amazing what the Lord can do with what is perceived as failure in our life, how he can spin it around in such a beautiful way and bring us to a place in our life where we never thought we'd be someday. And all this brings us back to your initial question. Hey, how did you get started? How did you become a writer? Well, when I was a kid, I told you about my broken childhood. Part of that broken childhood included me living for 2 years with my grandparents on my father's side. So my dad was too irresponsible. My mom, she had her hands full with one kid, which was my sister, and she didn't want to take me as a second. She was overwhelmed. So I lived for 2 years with my grandparents, and it just so happened that my grandfather was a real avid book lover. My grandfather had multiple bookshelves, all filled with all kinds of books. He was a history buff. He loved National Geographic volumes and books. He had a full library case full of those. He loved reading about countries and histories of countries and all that stuff. And he had a real genuine love of books. And so I grew up in that surrounding for 2 years, where my grandfather would take me every day. I would ask him the same thing: Animals of East Africa. Animals of East Africa. It's a National Geographic book. That was my favorite book of all. And we would go through those pages. I think if we didn't go through that book 200 times, we didn't go through it like once. And what happens when you're a small child? I was maybe 4, 5 years old, and you're sitting with someone who loves you, and that person who loves you is investing time in you, loving on you, and reading to you. What does that create? You associate books with love, and that's what happened to me growing up. I had no idea at the time that that's what was happening, but I have developed, because of that, a love of books, because I associated books, or even the smell of books, with being loved, spending time with someone you love, spending quality time with a person you appreciate and admire, which was my grandfather. So the love of book began there. And eventually in my teens, my parents were although they were from a welfare background, they were quite well read. My mom liked to read novels, and my dad loved to read about Bible prophecy. My dad he loved Hal Lindsey, Jack Van Impe, and a host of others. And he had a pretty impressive library of those books. And when I reached the age of 17, 17, 18, I began getting interested in these books. And I was like, you know what, I don't have much to do. Let's start reading.
Dude,
And
there must be something about that age, because I was the same, Jack Van Impe. I was, 15, 16, 17, like those kind of, the raptures around the corner kind of,
oh yeah,
like,
man, that got me excited.
so yeah.
That excited my faith. So the whole point is I started reading one after another, after another, after another. Man, very soon I had read my whole dad's library. He might have had, I don't know, maybe 20 books or something. And I was like starting to forge opinions of my own when it came to Bible prophecy. I had understandings of my own, and I was like, you know what, I can write a book. It was a little bit presumptuous, but it was good. That was God leading me to where he wanted me to be. And I had bought a computer. It was a Macintosh Performa. I was about, I think, 19 years old, 20 years old. And I was a member of Crossings Book Club at the time. So I fell in love with the genre of Christian writings, nonfiction. And my sister was a member of Doubleday, and she got a flyer in the Doubleday envelope she got every month, that there was also Crossings Book Club, which was a sub company, if you will, of Doubleday. It was their Christian division, basically. And they gave a really fantastic offer. It was like 7 books for 99 cents to get you started as a member. And I got all excited. I told my sister, hey, I want this. Can you mail it for me? She says, yeah, no problem. And maybe a month later, I got my books. I got my 7 books. Man, I was so excited. And then I got a catalog every month, and I could order a book. You had to order a book to stay a
See, this
member.
this is the world before Amazon and Kindle.
Exactly. Yes, it was
And
for us. It was Doubleday, and I was so excited about that. And so I was a member for many years of that book club, and I ordered many books that blessed my life to the utmost. I mean, God used these writings, these nonfiction Christian books, to sanctify me, to mold me, to give me a worldview, an understanding of the Bible and His will in my life, and all kinds of good stuff. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I developed my own, like I said, my own theology. I wrote a book in French. Imagine that. I said, I'm going to write a Jack Van Impe, Hal Lindsey type book. And I wrote it was in a Word doc, but it was significant. In Word doc format, 220 pages. That would be roughly 400 pages in 6x9, all about Bible prophecy. And it was 13 chapters. It was in French. So obviously that didn't see the light
how
of
old
day.
were you when you did this?
I was around 20 years old.
Okay.
I was around 20 years old, and it was a fairly good book. I submitted it to my pastor. He critiqued it. He helped me because he was also a school teacher, so he corrected my mistakes here and there. I did some editing. He was a preterist and I was a futurist, so we kind of didn't agree on our positions concerning the end times. So
Are you still like that?
a futurist?
Yeah.
Uh,
Just a side note,
I
not to derail you. Just
as a
curious.
side note, yeah, I for years and years I was a futurist, and I've encountered some preterist information recently
Oh,
that is
okay.
starting to get me shifting in certain things. And I won't. That's a whole can of worms. I'm not going to
Sure,
go
sure. I
into.
just,
So
that's why I said footnote. I didn't want to derail you. So
yeah,
he was
absolutely. No,
critiquing.
I don't mind it at all. I don't mind discussing this. But the point is, yeah, I found some information that made me seriously question the futurist viewpoint
Gotcha.
in my own life now. So,
Well,
but
for time,
every
yeah.
position, there's 4 main positions. Every
Yep.
position I find has problems with it.
They all have they're Swiss cheese. They all have different holes.
Yeah, there's
Okay,
holes in all of them.
but for our time, I don't want to derail you. You were talking about so you wrote that book though, and it was, this futurist kind of book. You had your pastor, you going over it, critiquing it. That was what I derailed you from. So,
Yeah, well, it was a great experience for me because that's when I realized, hey, I can write good. I'm not a good writer, but I can write good, so it's a good start. And even my pastor at the time said, "You have a good pen," you know. Uh, he says, "I don't agree with your views, but you have a good pen." And I understood that maybe I could use that to the glory of God, but I had a lot of mindset issues. A lot of mindset issues. Coming from the background I came from, I didn't see myself as an authority, as a writer. And you have the word author in authority, right? The word, and when you write an authoritative work or a book, you're setting yourself up as, hey, I'm an authority on this. So you're an author, you're an authority because you've authored something. So obviously I didn't have the right mindset. I always tell people when they ask me how long it took me to write my first book, I said about 7 months. And I'm not talking about that first book I just shared with you. I'm talking about more like a Lead Like a Superhero, which was my first real book on Amazon. I said it took me about 7 months to write it, but it took me 20 years to believe I could. And I think that's the main problem with most budding authors, all those who say, yeah, the Lord's called me to write a book, and who don't do it. For most of them, it's a mindset problem. They first of all, they don't see it as a priority. If the Lord told you to move tomorrow, if he said you're going to move from your present city and you go to the city I will show you, like he told Abraham, what would you do? They all would say the thing, well, I'd start packing. Okay, but he tells you you're going to write a book. He puts a book on your heart, and what happens? You procrastinate, you find excuses, you don't do it. Why is that? It's the same thing. It's the Lord asking you to do a thing, but you don't do it. Why is that? And the end reason is fear. People fear. They fear criticism. They fear they're not good enough. They fear they're not smart enough. They fear whatever. There's all kinds of fears that prevent Christian authors from
or
doing the thing.
same thing, but different, like, word, the confidence, right?
Yeah,
You said
exactly.
being an authority.
Being an
A
authority.
few weeks ago, I guested on a podcast, and they were asking me about books, and the guy Phil said, like, it took him 5 years to write the book he did. And it wasn't like, you know, I guarantee it didn't take 5 years of, like, he was constantly working on it and it took 5 years to make it. But I guarantee you he would say that confidence stuff, because of how the conversation went, like, so, 7 months to write your book and 20 years to believe you could. For most people,
Exactly.
it's I've got people in my messenger chats and stuff like that I've been talking to for years, 5 years maybe, whatever. Whenever I pivoted and wanted to make a go of trying to help people write books, and I've got people, it's like, if you just go to Messenger, you see our chats, and it's like, other than the ones where it's like every year just saying happy birthday to each other, there's nothing else, right? Like, those people. And then other things like, I've not talked to somebody since like 2018, and then you follow up and it's the same stuff still. I know people are not too busy to write their book, right? Like,
No,
that's not
no,
that's
no.
not what it is. It's the mindset. It's the
It's the mindset.
even today I saw a comment on, I posted the recording I did the other day with JD King. So that would probably be, depending on when I post this, like a recent episode of the podcast where, we talked
Is
about
it the one
why
about the marketing? Because I think I saw that.
market.
The
Yeah,
one
why
about
why are so
why
many
Christians
Christians afraid of
hesitate
market?
into marketing their book or their
Yeah,
something like that.
it's that same stuff like you and I are talking about, or,
Yeah,
especially the last few minutes,
yeah,
where believing, like, who am I? And but what
yeah.
me and him were talking about the other day, where it was a lot more like the false, humility of,
Well, can I address that a little bit?
sure, do it.
Because when I saw the title of that podcast that you have, Alyssa, I was like, this is great stuff. Because there's two mindsets that you can have concerning that when it comes to marketing. Okay, there's well, that's self-promotion, and I just want the Lord to promote me, and I need
And
to
that's
be
exactly
humble.
that's
And
exactly what we were
promoting the
tackling.
book,
Yeah.
okay, and promoting the book makes me someone who's not humble because I'm trying to say to people, hey, look at me, look at what I did. There's that mindset. There's the other mindset that says, hey, you're very selfish. Whoa, what? There's a message that God put on your heart that he told you to write, and you want to keep it from people.
Yep. And that's what we said.
Why is that?
Yeah. Run with it.
And so when you market the book, what are you doing? You're basically taking that message that God told you to write, and you're making sure that as many people as possible are going to grow from it. And if you
Right.
can wrap your mind around this and change, it's only an angle, the way you look at the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you change the way you look at the thing, the thing you look at changes. So if you do that, all of a sudden you have a whole new angle, and you're like, whoa, okay, so yeah, marketing my book is a good thing.
Yeah,
I'm
I
doing
think
the
you'll like
right
that
thing.
discussion. You and I are going to be pulling stuff out of each other the way he and I were if we keep going this way. But like you said, it's selfish if God's given you that message, and I repeat this all the time, so I'm fine kind of going there again. If God's given you a message, then why would you not do everything possible to make people know about it? And I think the way we talked about it in our other conversation, the way we framed it was, and then if you do want to impact people's lives with your book and you're not marketing and doing the steps needed, that's like basically trying to reap a harvest that you aren't willing to sow. Like how can you reap what you're not sowing? So it's like,
Exactly.
and I'll tell you, this man who I met with before I first went on the mission field, Roy Tibbet, him and his wife have worked in the Philippines and just came back from Mozambique. Um, go to my mom's church. They worked with Wycliffe for many years and translating and whatnot. He told me before I wrote like my first newsletter, before I went anywhere, God works on the informed mind. And what he meant was you got to inform people of what you're doing and what you want to do.
Oh, yeah.
And, ask for, in this case, asking for support, letting people know what I'm doing, what I'm going to do, why I'm going to the Netherlands and stuff, how long I'm going to be there. So like you can't just go into your prayer closet and pray for God to give you the money. You got to like inform people and pray. And that God works on the informed mind. Um,
Yes.
I just got distracted by a ding or something. My wife has messaged me. So let's wrap this up. I'm gonna tell her.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell her to come in 20 minutes. And so I'm saying that to say, people can't know your book exists if you're not doing anything to let them know it exists, right? Well,
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
told Noah to build the ark,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
brought the animals. Yeah, well, you're not Noah. You're not Noah, and you're not building an ark.
God uses marketing a lot.
Yeah. So,
What I mean by that is that the marketing you're going to do, he's going to use,
yeah.
you know.
Okay. Let me let's so tell me how you wound up, like, because you help people write books too, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, I
so
do.
so
So I
we're
have a YouTube
competition.
channel.
We're competition. No, just
Well, yeah,
joking.
competition. Yeah, in the Christian realm. Yeah, we bat for the
Um,
same
building
team.
the same kingdom.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So I have a YouTube channel that people can check out. I don't have many videos yet on it, 26, 27 videos, but they address, a lot of them address the mindset of Christian writers. So that I'm really trying to help Christian leaders to write the book that God put on their heart and release it into the marketplace. That's the aim of the course I built, which is called How to Write a Nonfiction Christian Book. So I have a course that I built there, and I also have that YouTube channel called Christian Nonfiction Writing Tips. Christian Nonfiction Writing Tips. So it's on YouTube, and the videos address all kinds of stuff from a nonfiction Christian writing perspective, helping authors to do the work and to gain insights and all kinds of good stuff, especially about the mindset. I really try to help people get freed from the stuff that hinders them from moving forward and doing the thing.
Right. Okay. So, but you work like with people directly too, right?
I would love
Or
to work with people directly.
all right.
So yeah, so people who enroll in the course, basically they get the 18 hours plus of content that I built. So if they go through the modules, they go from blank page to published author on Amazon KDP. So that's the
Okay.
what the course is all about. But they also get lifetime coaching from me.
Okay.
So
So
it's
how does
pretty
that
good. It's a
work?
pretty good deal.
Right. No. So
Well,
how's
it
that? How's
works.
that
It
work?
works.
So I know
There's
how to send
group
people to you.
coaching. So once they enroll, they have access to my Facebook group, where they get group coaching, but they also have access to me as a teacher. They can message me, ask me questions, whatever. Like, and I'm willing to do the answering stuff, the questions, the queries people have. Because right now I don't have such like a really big platform. Obviously, if there's 2,000 people involved in writing the course, then maybe giving them personal access will not be an option anymore. But right now it's an option.
What do you mean you don't have a very big platform? You have 2,000 people in your group, or did I hear you wrong?
No, that's the 2,000 people in our Facebook page. That's for Thriving on Purpose. It's not for the writing
Ah, okay, I
course.
gotcha.
Yeah, it's more for the ministry and all the other stuff. But and it's ironic because you know how on YouTube sometimes you mean well and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I told you initially, I don't know if it was during the broadcast or before, but my YouTube, there's a lot of teaching videos where I minister to people through the broadcast and podcast. But there's also compilations, and I did a couple of compilations that were basically decrees and declarations and good stuff, that where I read declarations, biblical passages that encourage people and help them. And the YouTube video grew mostly from those. So the people are not in it for the teachings; they're in it for the declarations. So the numbers, although they're great, I'm happy to have 2,000 people subscribe to our 2,800 people subscribe to Thriving on Purpose. That's awesome. But a lot of them came through those declarations. So they were like, oh, that's a declaration channel. And it's not. Like there's maybe 4 or 5 videos that are declarations. So a lot, in fact, these went almost viral. Like one of them has 100,000 views. So a lot of people got engaged through that video. But unfortunately, they don't really engage. Like they don't make the link like, oh, this declaration video, there's this dude who does teachings too. And he's pretty good. I like him. That didn't happen. So
Gotcha.
so I get like maybe 35 views when I teach, and I got these videos that get thousands of views when it's declarations or other stuff. So it is what it is, right?
Sure. But so and you can decline to answer anything I ask you about like your business and stuff if you want. I don't and I'll edit or whatever. But so like are you happy with, or do you have a lot of people in your course, like, or is that one of several income streams for you, or like how does that work?
One of
Because
several. One of several. My wife has.
the reason I ask, just so you know, my
Yeah,
motives is I've never done a course, and I might not
you should.
because well so like the reason I've hesitated is because the amount of work to make one,
It's a lot of work.
and I want to I'm at a place as far as the income goes where I don't I was told not to do a course until it's like um
Until there are
to
people
ex-
requesting.
until yeah I'm scaling what I'm doing already,
Yeah,
and 3 kids ministry.
yeah.
When I have audiobooks, I'm in a space right now where I'm just going to bed late at night, sleeping in because of doing audio at night behind me here. So anyway, I'm curious how. Okay, so like yeah, I might get
There's
ideas
two
from you.
schools of thought. There's two schools of thought on whether to make a course or not, and depending on like this size of your platform and all that. Yeah, it would be definitely better if you've scaled up and you have people requesting a course from you. Then yeah, that's going to sell. People are
Nobody
going to.
is, you know, nobody's
Huh?
requesting a course from me, but I work more with people individually, or doing the taking people's books on, helping them
Yeah,
make their book.
yeah.
So just a few
So
people.
what I like about a course is that it's on autopilot. It's hard to make. It takes long. It's a big commitment to do all the slides and all that, and I didn't really enjoy the process particularly. But once you've filmed it and you've put it together and it's out there on whatever platform you choose to put your course on, then it's on autopilot. Like people can buy into it. Well, I shouldn't say it on autopilot. Let me rephrase that, because unless you advertise it, most
Like
platforms will not.
it becomes an asset that you can keep
It's an
using,
asset. It's an
right?
asset. Now, obviously, once the course is done, as you scale your platform, it's going to get interesting, right? Because people are going to start buying into the course. So you can have maybe a slightly different approach when you're helping someone. Say, oh yeah, I can help you with that. The short answer is blah, blah, blah. I talk a lot more detail about it in my course, where I talk about it over an hour, and you're going to learn all the ins and outs. Oh, people are like, oh, that's interesting. They might look into your course. Now that's the fun part, like the good aspect. Now the other thing is more like Well, if you build the whole thing and you put all this energy and then it doesn't
Right.
sell, people
That's
don't buy into it.
I just sent a link to JD the other day of some guy in Toronto saying like, sell your course before you build it, which
Yeah.
is like duh. I've done that. I've done a similar thing where I've made the lead magnet for my website. I just asked Facebook like, hey, if I wrote like a 10-page booklet or document of like whatever you need to know about writing or a toolkit or something, like what would you want
Yeah.
it what would you want it to cover, and then did that whole thing, like DM me and I message people, ask them, and they tell me, and then I go write it, like I go write about I did that with my tongues book. If I were to write a book about the biggest misconceptions people have about speaking in tongues, like what would you include? And I made a Google Drive document and shared it. And the things that people kept telling me over and over again were the things I focused on. So I know
Yeah.
what people want. So I've done that kind of stuff, just not a course.
Yeah. Well, like for me, it's been the way we used to market it was like we built the course. And then Elizabeth was like, it'd be good to get some not endorsements for the course. Like if it helps people, they could like write a paragraph. You can put it on the landing page and say, hey, so and so was helped by the course. Oh, this course really helped me and it changed my life. And I wrote my book and I'm so happy, whatever. So like, okay, so we could offer it for free for maybe the people we do know, like on Facebook, hey,
Right.
friends and stuff, hey, I created this course. Are you interested in writing a book and all that? So there was a lot of people initially that showed interest. A lot of them, like, well, a lot. For me, 20 was a lot. I was like, okay, 20 people, that's pretty good. So we created a group, and they got the course for free. And I was thinking, this is good. They're gonna engage with me, and I'm gonna do Q&As every week, and it's gonna be cool. And to be honest, when you disrespect what you don't pay for, it's as simple as that. They
Uh,
got it for free. They didn't see any value in it. They didn't do it. Simple as that. So sadly, unless a person puts some skin in the game and pays the money, they're not going to really be engaged. And it's a sad human trait. Even if you're dealing with Christians, it is what it is. That had
or
one person really
perhaps
engaged.
even more so with Christians who,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
make
a
a
lot of
joke
a
that
lot of Christians like the
people,
Holy God's going to do it through me. Hallelujah.
or the eternal value shouldn't have a monetary price, you know,
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Freely I have received, freely I will give. And they take it out of context. They don't understand what that means. But the point
Yeah,
is,
Jesus wasn't talking about not paying someone for their work. That's not what he was talking
exactly. But the point is, a lot of people, unfortunately, they just don't do it. And if they don't do it, then they don't give you the feedback, and there's no engagement, and the ball doesn't get rolling. So that
about.
was
Sure.
the hurdle I encountered. The course is still up. I mean, it's still I'm using the YouTube channel of Christian nonfiction writing tips to try to get people engaged in the course.
All right. So
Uh,
how do I send people to your course who um are maybe not gonna want to work with either one of us about like a one-on-one or something, and a course is exactly what they need? How do I send people to it?
yeah, I can. I have to check the link here.
Uh,
Just give me a sec.
Or just tell
I
me the title of it, and then I'll have it in the show notes whenever we
Yeah,
post
well,
this.
we had a link, and I don't know if we kept it because we have all these links that we're paying for through GoDaddy,
Sure.
and sometimes you have to say, no, well, let's kill this one. It's not working for us.
Or
So you have to make
redirect.
decisions. Oh, I think this one might still be on nonfictionchristianbook.com. That is where we put the course on a platform called Teachable.
Uh-huh.
But if it doesn't work, I'll give you the link after the broadcast. You can use that link that I'm going to give you, which is the official Teachable link.
Sure. Sure. Because
So yeah.
I think
It's an
when
18-hour course, and they have access to it's all in video and audio. So they can download it in MP3, listen to it on the way to work, whatever, or they can do the video format. There's PDFs
are
included.
you comfortable saying in the recording what the price currently is, or would you rather them go to it
The
in
price
case?
is right now 197. I
Okay.
had a promo run in early September where we did a
And then
promotion.
maybe in 6 months from now it'll be like $500 with inflation. And no, that's why that's good, because I know, like I told you before we talked, I want these to stay on the internet for a long time. And
Yeah,
so it's like, I don't know if you want to say what the price is, and then somebody listens to this in the archives, and it's like, where did that site go, or whatever.
yeah.
But
No,
okay,
it's going to be there for a while because Teachable is a free platform, so the course can stay free. Even like we're paying for the premium, but even if like we
sure.
stop paying this, we still have our account and the course is still there. So, um,
Right. So like $200 to like do your course, and people are
yeah.
only going to benefit from it if they do what they learn in it, right?
Oh yeah, and that was the hardest thing was when I did Q&As in the beginning, I realized, my goodness, people are so unintentional. It's sad. I had I would write in the group, okay, Q&A tonight, 7 Eastern, show up, I'll answer your questions. They'd show up, they didn't have any questions.
Right. I've
Like, you
done that
think
too.
what? I'm think I'm gonna juggle here and entertain you or something? I have better things to do. I mean, why are you here? Did you
Right.
do module one? No, I didn't do one. Well, what are you doing here? Like, so I found it very challenging to get people motivated. And I realized through that experience that the greatest problem with people is, like you said, they have very little confidence when it comes to writing their book, number one. So to
Right.
really, you have to work on their mindset a lot as a coach. And the second thing is people are unintentional by nature. I realized that, and that was something that in my personal growth journey was huge. When I went through the John Maxwell team teachings and course, he really emphasized that. He says, intentionality is where everything begins. A lot
Right.
of people say they dream about this, they'd like to do that, they'd love to do this, and but it's like ooh, kind of pie in the sky, and they're not really gonna do anything about it.
Sure. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Uh, we don't have to hard stop at the time I told you, but it's just more like the warning that my wife will come in. I can't control the noise behind
Yeah,
me and
well,
stuff.
same here. My
Because,
wife, I got a
right.
set of kids in front, so
Well, so I was going to say, you know, several years ago, I came up with it's a long story for another time for other people maybe, but I invested like nearly $10,000 in a mastermind called Client Kit, and learning how to start a business, and how to test my offer, and if the books and stuff is what my skills and desire and passion are, what to do and how to build that up. And it was hard, because they were like, no, Steve, you gotta add a zero to your, like, if you want to really get some money and whatever, and solve the kind of crisis, the thing that happened with my wife and I, for why we needed to kind of make real money and not just live on support, because that's this other can of worms, this other conversation. And
absolutely, I totally feel
um
you.
so yeah, maybe offline I'll kind of tell you, or when I hit the stop button, I'll tell you the exact nature of it, for those who know what CRA stands for. But anyway, so just complications with what country thinks I need to give them my, tax my income and whatever. But
Yeah,
and so we were doing that, and I had a hard time of it, because I'm like, okay, well, I have this high price for working with me on what I'm going to be offering, and these guys are like, no, raise it even more. Like, that's, you're going to attract tire kickers. And I had that mindset, like you were talking about, with 20 years to believe you could write a book. Well, I'm going from like living on support, almost hand to mouth some months. And now I'm like trying to talk to people to pay me thousands of dollars to help them write a book. And these guys are all like, Steve, you're lowballing. Like, so I'm around people who are like, Steve, change the pond you're fishing in. You know what I mean? And it's that first year was really hard, because I get all these people hopping on calls with me who are like, what? You won't ghost write me a book for $20? Or what? You charge money for this? You're a
yeah,
missionary. I thought you would know more than anyone. It's like,
yeah,
no, if I'm gonna do my mission, that takes funds, and I'm doing the people I serve a disservice if I'm broke and not able to really do what I came here to do. So no, I charge so that it's profitable and I can function and whatever. So I'm telling you this to say, like a year later, I started also doing some sales on the side for a woman named Janet Clark, who's also a believer, from one of the more kind of Anglican, one of these denominations where the priests wear like the garbs and whatever. And so she was telling me about, like, what her and these other people were teaming up to offer and do sales for businesses. And she told me what the commissions were. She told me what the price was and how it would take a month or two before I'm really seeing people come, along. And I said, so like, it doesn't matter that I've not done your program, I've not done whatever, I've not, like, you still have confidence in me that I can sell it? And she said, yes. You know why? So why? If you paid $10,000 for that other thing,
mm,
right? Like, you're qualified to sell something to people that's high value. Like if you're willing to pay the price, you're qualified to sell that price.
Yes.
And it broke this other mindset off of me. Like I might not be a client of hers doing the thing that she's hiring me to prospect, like on the side for her and stuff. But I'm like, well, yeah, like there's something to be said. Like you just said this about your course. Um, you don't appreciate something you don't pay for.
Mhm.
And so I'm not trying to berate, listeners of this who've been listening to me for years and now they're hearing me talk about these kinds of things. But there is
Well,
something to
there's a
be
time
said
for
about the
freebies. I mean,
price.
it's okay.
Sure.
Sometimes you're growing an email list and you have a little PDF there, or a little 2 video course you're selling, whatever. Like selling, you're giving for free. So hey, hop on my video course. 2 videos, whatever, and
Right.
that's fine.
And
But
to clarify, so people don't take what I said the wrong way, it took me 2 or 3 months to come up with that money to go do it, right? Like, and I had supporters. I went to supporters. I had family loan me money. I had, like, earlier that year I did GoFundMe for my
mm,
daughter to be born, like at the hospital, and now I'm doing the same kind of scrambling, asking people more privately, and then I talk to people who are like, um, same thing, like uh, well, if you're doing the Lord's work, why would you charge, or why would you charge so much, or why won't you help me as a volunteer when because I've been through what I've been through, like in your own way with the poverty or the welfare, and my case, having people I almost said the Spanish word, um committing but then not following through, or when you have, like, summer and Christmas were always stressful months because the support drops, right?
mm,
Like, and people don't double up when they're, so I got tired of that, and I was like, I gotta focus on something that pays the bills. And it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, then prospecting is hard, but it's worth it when I'm getting the right clients and whatever. And when you talk to people who think, um we could have a conversation another time about poverty and prosperity mindsets
oh
in the
my goodness,
church.
yeah.
you know
That's been
so
something I've taught quite a bit on the podcast.
there you go.
Yeah,
Okay, so what's
and
your podcast link for those who want to hear more from you like this?
yeah, well, everything can be found at thrivingonpurpose.com. So thrivingonpurpose.com. That's where they're going to find on the upper tabs. They can click the upper tabs. There's the podcast. There's my books, Amazon Books page. There's obviously the courses, because they land at Thriving on Purpose Academy when they get to that page. So they have access to all the courses I'm offering. I'm offering a course on how to find your purpose, a course on how to write a book.
Right.
So that we have, like, I think four or five courses so far. So yeah, so we're building it. We're building Thriving on Purpose Academy slowly but surely.
Right. So how can we I don't know, partner together or be helpful to one another in that? I want to send people your way because I don't plan on writing a course, but I trust you and think people are going to benefit from going and doing
Absolutely.
a course somebody else already
I
did.
know I know that if someone goes through the modules,
Yeah.
they will succeed. They will have a book, they'll publish, and they'll be proud of it. Uh, but they have to go through the modules.
Gotcha.
and
Gotcha.
that's what I find is challenging when people don't pay. And obviously that's why we
And
changed the
200
whole thing.
bucks.
And I did some
Yeah.
homework prior to also. I looked at what was already out there. There were some Christians out there offering a
Yeah.
course to write a book, and
I've probably seen them too.
there were bigger platforms, there were bigger names, you could say, and it was around $500. And I was like, well, I'm not a big name, so obviously I can't charge the same, because people are going to look,
But
compare, and go like, well,
maybe that's the thing you were talking about with the mindset and believing, because you
it's no, that's reality.
sure,
There's a difference between mindset, knowing what you're offering. I know
and
what
the
I'm offering
market
is as good as what they're offering,
and
but
the
I also
market.
know reality. And reality is, I've heard of this guy. I have never
Yeah.
heard of this guy. I've
Oh
seen
yeah, I
this
get it.
guy's books. I've seen this guy on whatever TV, whatever, but I
Got it.
don't
Yeah.
know at least squat
Well,
about that
anyway,
guy. So obviously they will.
yeah, but you get what I'm saying. Like maybe
Yeah,
maybe after some time, if somebody's coming in and listening to this in the archives, they're like, oh, that guy's course isn't the same as price as it was when they did this recording. It's just
yeah.
inflation, maybe, but I don't know. Just um, yeah, that's what I keep hearing. What's his face called? Uh, what's his name? The conservative guy. Just inflation. As far as
Yeah.
the well, how do you pronounce his
Just
name?
inflation.
Pierre, how do you pronounce his name? Because it's French too.
Poliev.
Yeah,
Poliev.
Polyev. Yeah, this guy at the time of this recording, conservative party leader. Um, but anyway, okay. So yeah, my wife will be walking in any moment now. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
I,
So we can stop recording whenever
so
you're
yeah,
ready.
well, thank you for your time. I'm gonna hit the stop button, but we can keep chatting. Thanks for your time, Sebastien, and uh, we'll include these links in the show notes. And I know we got some good value, and I enjoyed getting to know you. Um, and like I said, I like giving people the kind of the opportunity for, like, if it's a book I'm talking to them about, where people can go buy their book, or if it's their ministry, like where can the listener go for more. And I definitely would encourage people to check out your course. You said it's thrivingonpurpose.com.
Thrivingonpurpose.com will bring them to the
Yeah,
Thriving on Purpose Academy, where and the tabs above, they can click for the podcast, they can click for the book page, they can click for anything that they are searching for on that. That's our main hub. And of course, you can find me on Amazon. I wrote 8 books so far. There's some books on prosperity there. You mentioned that earlier.
good.
There's a couple
I
of
da-
them
I
about
I
prosperity.
downloaded one. I downloaded or on Kindle Unlimited or something. One of them. I was because we recorded this so fast after I talked to you, or about doing this. I've not read it yet, but I would have tried to read some of it before we talked. But whatever. I think the conversation went exactly how it was supposed to. And okay, so you hear that, listener, where you can go get more from Sebastien Richard, and